The school board study session for May 7, 2024 is now in order. First item on the agenda, surplus property, building maintenance, ground equipment. Dr. Luna?
Board members, following policy, we have a list of maintenance ground equipment that has reached its lifespan. And so you have the list in front of you to be declared surplus property.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. The second item is surplus property, CTE, broken equipment. Dr. Luna?
Yes, board members, very similarly, there are two pieces of equipment also listed from the career technical education that has also exceeded its lifespan and or has been broken, and those items are additionally listed.
The third item is school board attorney fee letter of understanding. Dr. Luna, first reading.
You have a copy of the letter in your packet. Periodically, we review our engagement letter and update it. It's been about 3 years since we did that, so that's just a new and updated engagement letter.
Okay, thank you, sir. Number 4, FY 2025 Consolidated Entitlement Grant Application. Dr. Luna?
Yes, I'd like to call Lori Russell up, please, and she will explain to us the FY25 Consolidated Entitlement Grant and some initial allocation dollars.
Shannon Peacock and I are here to present the initial allocations for FY25 Consolidated Entitlement Grant. This table, there are 7 funding sources that you see on this slide and also in your packet. The table gives a brief description of each funding source, the participating schools, and a comparison of next year's allocation to our current allocation. Within these comparisons, you'll see that Title I Neglected, and Title IV will all be receiving a reduction in funds for the upcoming school year. The other funding sources will either increase or remain the same. We've included one side note for IDEA Part B. Although you see that there's no change indicated for their FY25 allocation, that funding source recently received a substantial increase. That increase was added to our current funding, and it will remain for next year's funding. Does anyone have any questions on this information?
The funding for the special needs kids, can you give them a little bit more detail on that?
Yes, sir. I'll have the Director of Special Populations address that.
Good evening. Majority of our funding for special populations and IDA is personnel, primarily.
Is that for the new school or just for overall Montgomery County?
What is that? I'm sorry?
Are those increase in education? Did you say the teachers?
Actually, primary and IDA, there are some allegations for teachers, educational assistants, related service personnel, various different personnel that support students with disabilities.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Mayberry?
So on here it says like negative numbers there. Are those where you got less money this year than previous years? Is that what that is?
IDA, we did not, but title funds, I believe, did see a cut in some funding.
Okay.
Thank you. 2024-2025 Student Code of Conduct Update. First read, Dr. Luna.
Yes, I'd like to welcome our Director of Middle Schools, Matt Slight, up, and he is going to discuss the proposed updates for the Code of Conduct for next school year.
Good evening, Board. Good evening, Dr. Luna. Chairman Griffey, Vice Chairman Garland. Just want to take a couple of minutes. It seems like we were just here to discuss the 23-24 Student Code of Conduct, but we're back again. So I'd like to start off tonight, take a moment just to share with you the amount of time and effort that we've put into a review. As you know, we annually review the Student Code of Conduct. This is not just about behaviors. This is about special populations. It's about 504s. It's about transportation, everything that governs what we do with our students within the county. And so starting in December of 2023, in January 2nd, we deployed district-wide stakeholder code of conduct survey. This survey went out to all stakeholders, and I'm happy to report that we had 607 responses, which seems small, I know, but it's the largest response that we've had yet with the Code of Conduct and the survey. December 5th, 2023, Code of Conduct Review and Revision Survey was deployed. This was deployed to administrators, to every school, to make sure that they had an opportunity to respond. And I have lost my screen. Thank you. January 10th, the survey was closed. On January 17th, the survey responses were shared with level directors. As those surveys came in, the data was collected, was disaggregated. We shared it with the level directors. We visited about what recommendations were being made. On January 24th, high school student advisory, students were even consulted in terms of code of conduct, what's working, what's not working, as well as January 24th when we met with middle school students. April 2nd, the survey responses were reviewed with level directors again. And April 3rd through the 4th, level directors reviewed recommendations with principals and assistant principals to get last-minute feedback. April 29th, the senior leadership team reviewed the recommendations, proposed recommendations for the code of conduct, and that brings us to this evening where we'd like to make some of those proposals to you. As we look at the 23-24 Code of Conduct survey, we wanted you to know that there was 62% of the respondents were parents, 31% of the respondents were employees. That's out of the 607 that we received. If you look to the next graph, response to the Code of Conduct clearly provides the district expectations. 67% of respondents agreed and were in agreement with that it did meet the district's expectations. Student code of conduct, or the students understand the code of conduct. 43% of our respondents said that yes, students do understand the code of conduct. And more importantly, 84% of all overall were in agreement that they understand the code of conduct, which is good because we have continued to refine and make the code of conduct less of a puzzle for people to understand, to make sure that everybody is on the same page. As we look at the 23-24 Code of Conduct survey, here's some of the breakdown as far as the information that we received back. 3% of those who responded said it was difficult to understand. 37% said consequences were not effective. 29% said consequences are not applied according to what they read. 5% says does not answer all of my questions, and 26% of those who responded said I do not have problems with the code of conduct. Comparison by year, as you can see, in the green is 22, year 22, and the black is 23, so you can see that in agreement, all survey areas is moving in the right direction. So clear expectations was up from 22 to 23, from 48 to 68%, from 28% to 85% in 2023, indicating that they understand the student code of conduct. From 20 to 44% on students understand. Consequences not effective. We saw that in 2022, 61% said it wasn't effective, but only 37% of the respondents said it wasn't effective. So we're seeing an increase in effectiveness of our code of conduct. And we're up from 4% that says no problems to 26%, indicating that there are no problems with the student code of conduct. So as we look at the 23-24 Code of Conduct, consequences not effective. A couple major things to take away there. There are not enough consequences that deter student behavior was one of the themes that came out of that survey. Also, there are too many opportunities for students to misbehave, okay? So part of that, as we looked at that and we discussed that information, that data coming in, given the larger number of parents completed the survey, it's possible participants don't know all of the available consequences for the student. Most parents are only concentrated on the consequence their student received and not all the consequences that are available within the Code of Conduct. Also within your slide deck, we did provide the 23-24. This is a live link for you, so as you go through and want to look back at the 23-24, you can do so. I also wanted to share with you, we started this last year, and just as a reminder, the format of the Code of Conduct. Last year in 23-24, we saw the addition of elementary schools being placed at the top with high school and middle schools. On the left under offense, that's the cell phone offense that you're seeing here, but every offense that's listed from category 1 through 0 tolerance is specified, as well as an explanation. Also the actions which are required of the teacher and administrator with the consequences and with interventions. Also down at the bottom, you'll see state offense codes. Those are usually highlighted in blue and linked to the codes that the states use to track the offenses that occur within Montgomery County. Proposed changes for the code of conduct, looking under category 1 offenses. A couple here that I want to highlight. The first of which is at the top, where we propose to add, in accordance with FERPA, information about student consequences will not be provided except to students, parents, or legal guardians. This has become quite a situation with administrators throughout the district. Parents usually receive a consequence for their child. If there's more than one student involved, then what we find is that they're more interested in knowing what happens with the other children that are involved, and the law prohibits us, the federal Education Rights and Privacy Act prohibits administrators from being able to talk about any other student but the parent's child, legal guardian's child. So we felt that putting this at the top of each of the consequences throughout the code of conduct will help educate our parents to know that we are not simply not wanting to address the issue, but legally we cannot, okay? The other proposed change is to remove and documents the number of occurrences. I know that seems small, but that's really important to our teachers. Along with refining the code of conduct, our technology department has been working diligently to refine the processing procedures through Admin Plus, a platform that they have created for documentation purposes. So it is no longer necessary for a teacher to document this is the number of times this has happened. As they use that system, an administrator can go back at any time, look up a student and see the number of times that student's been put in the system across the building, okay? So we're removing that just for simplicity reasons. Also under interventions, one of the things we wanted to clarify here is that we have available interventions for students. We have more interventions in this district than we've ever had before, and I'm super proud of that. And we've actually, last year was the first year that these interventions appeared within the code of conduct. But adding available interventions also leads to the proper application of that. So not every consequence needs to be a referral to a counselor. It may not require an intervention, but we're making those interventions available. The other big thing to note that will be throughout the code of conduct is moving from positive behavior plan, which is a very specific tool that can be used at the school building level, to a tiered behavior intervention. Tiered behavior interventions gives teachers, building administrators, student support coordinators, that team the ability to make small, quick adjustments to student behaviors for support that do not necessarily require a formal plan, okay? So those tiered behavior interventions could result in a positive behavior plan at some point, but it's not something we're gonna jump to right off the bat. Looking at the next change, under minor dress code violations, Student Services asked us to put in an explanation for that. You'll see that dress code appears twice. Just in that first dress code violation, what we're simply wanting to express here is that a student has the ability to make the adjustments to a dress code violation. And that's the difference between a category 1 offense and a category 2 offense. So they have the ability. There are sometimes that the clothing that is worn is not appropriate for school. A parent may need to be called, and if a parent can't come, that may result in that student being placed in ISS or in the counseling department until the clothing can come in. So there's a difference there. Just to clarify that, we went ahead and changed that explanation and added that explanation. There's no proposed changes for category 2 offenses. Category 3 offenses is where we're going to find a lot of our shifts this year. As we're looking at category 3 offenses, I want to remind you, category 3 offenses usually range in consequences from in-school to out-of-school suspension. This is a 23-24 student offense for assault and fighting. This is one of the changes that we have been focused on this year, is separating out. So this is how it appears in in the 23-24 Code of Conduct. Our proposed change for next year, for 24-25, is to separate assault and fighting into 2 separate offenses, that they're no longer combined together. We've run into some discrepancies with that. We've also run into coding issues with it and not being used, the appropriate code being used at times. So assault and fighting, we'd look to separate those two out. So we would have a proposed offense of assault of student. We would also revise the explanation for assault of student. Under assault of student, it would read assault is intentionally causing bodily harm to an individual. Report to proper law enforcement officials if bodily harm is inflicted. And I apologize, on the screen that's listed twice. It should not be in your version of the revision of the Code of Conduct. Also, there will only be one code that appears on here for state reporting, and that's OC 33, so we'll update that code just for assault of student. That would require us then to make a separate code for fighting. The other big takeaway for fighting is making sure that the explanation is clear. Fighting is a mutual participation in an incident involving physical violence where there is no major injury. Self-defense is defined as a student who reasonably believes him or herself to be in imminent danger from another student and uses the necessary force to protect himself or herself. If the victim of force has the opportunity to walk away but chooses to use force in return, this constitutes retaliation, not self-defense. So we're trying to be much more specific for parents in what constitutes self-defense, but also what a fight is, okay? So those were the two changes in Category 3 around assault and fighting. And here they pop out as well. Addressing threats. Threats has been another area of concern within our district. As we know, last year, the state implemented a new law around threats of mass violence. Prior to that law, CMCSS was proactive and created an offense called credible threats. And we use credible threats to address the seriousness of those major disruptions that occur in situations where a building has been threatened or students within the building have been threatened. Last year when the new law came out for threats of mass violence, the time that it came out, we were right at this point as a board reviewing the Code of Conduct, and so we added threats of mass violence with the existing credible threats, bomb threats, and threats of mass violence. As such, we ended up coming away with this year proposing that threats or credible threats be removed from a zero tolerance offense. We're looking at some updated changes in terms of what that would read. An explanation of threat is a statement of an intention to inflict pain, injury, damage, or other hostile action on another student in the case of this offense code. So a student threatening another student directly is one thing. A student threatening two or more students would fall under threats of mass violence, okay? And so we have those situations every day where students say things, and sometimes we have to really dial in with that microscope to see, is this a threat of mass violence or is this just a threat against another student? And it gives us more opportunities and better ways to handle it as far as range of consequences go. When we look at the last year's, a threat is deemed a credible threat if it includes the following components: an intent or plan to inflict bodily injury or death to another student or school employee communicated through verbal, written, electronic means. The communication is intended to and actually causes students or district employees to believe they are under threat of death or serious bodily injury and creates actual disruptive activity at the school that requires administrative intervention. In addition, a student threatens mass violence on school property or at a school-related activity. So that whole explanation appeared last year in 23-24. We're going to remove and change just for threats alone that a threat is a statement of an intention to inflict pain just for that Category 3 offense, okay? This will still appear under the zero tolerance offense for our students in reference to bomb threats and threats of mass violence, which are very similar in nature, okay? Here's the slide with the revision on it. Also within that revision, I want to apologize. Here, under the explanation, this is what appeared last year. Here's the revision. The revision for threats is a threat is a statement of intention to inflict pain, injury, damage, or other hostile action or transmission of any communication containing a threat to cause bodily injury or death to another student. So here's the difference, and I apologize for the confusion. We added a statement under this with threats that it's also the communication and transmission. So this is going to take care of text messages where students might text another student, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to harm you. Okay, so we wanted to make sure that that was included as well under that category 3 offense for threats. In this category, 0 tolerance, to remove, the only thing we're removing is the actual first one, credible threats. It will now read threats of mass violence and bomb threats as a 0 tolerance offense. There's also an updated explanation under this. When a student threatens mass violence on school property or at school-related or sponsored activity wherein mass violence means any act which a reasonable person would conclude could lead to serious bodily injury as defined by Tennessee Code annotated 39-16-517, or the death of 2 or more persons. So that is updated from the law, the version of the law that we have now in reference to threats of mass violence. All right, so category 3 offense under tobacco. We have been dealing with CBD and vape in our schools diligently, and it has come in many shapes and forms. And so currently we have are proposing a shift in how we approach this, looking at a category 3 offense for CBD and vape. Under category 3 offense, can be an in-school suspension not to exceed 5 days, out-of-school suspension not to exceed, this should say 5 days. Confer with the level director if there's multiple offenses. So as we look at that CBD and vape puts a specific challenge to us because we know that they are derivatives from hemp. And so there are times when students may think that they are actually in possession of CBD, but it could actually be THC. THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. So when we, there's a little bit of an explanation here, but when we currently, if a student has any substance that tests positive for THC, okay, or tests for THC and has any trace amount in it, it constitutes a 0 tolerance offense. A student may be in possession of CBD, may have a vape that has CBD, which does not reach the legal requirements of having a threshold of 0.3% of THC in it for it to constitute a criminal act of being in possession of marijuana. So as such, what we are proposing is that if it doesn't meet the threshold of that 0.03%, which can be ascertained through the use of the SRO's law enforcement's presumptive field test, those field tests can clarify for us if it is below that 0.03% or at that 0.03%. If it's not, then we'd like to handle CBD, tobacco, and vape under the category 3 offense. If that substance does test and meet the threshold for the 0.03%, which would constitute a criminal act of possession of marijuana, then that student would be subject to a 0 tolerance offense. Okay, that's a lot.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How often do the SRO's field tests, how often are they tested to make sure that they're accurate?
How often are the tests
The
checked for
the
accuracy?
equipment that they use to test this THC, whatever the case may be, how often do they test?
So I do know that the field tests come in kits that they are administered in. As far as calibration of those or the expiration dates of those or anything like that, I don't know, but I would not have any problem to check with our SROs and with the Sheriff's Department to see and get you a final answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
So we'd like to add vape and CBD, but also the wording in that category 3 would also suggest a positive presumptive field test for THC, a 0.03% or more is a 0 tolerance offense resulting in a mandatory 1-year expulsion from the date of the incident, okay? So that would be the separating indicator for this offense. Looking at proposed changes for Category 4, this is another area that has been brought to our attention throughout the last couple of school years. Under alcohol, alcohol isn't the only intoxicant that we see in schools. We know that students can often, actually, as we're talking about CBD, there are things that can be taken that are not necessarily illegal that can have the same type of an effect on a student to cause an intoxicated state. So we felt that it would be necessary to propose an addition to Category 4 alcohol and other intoxicating substances not covered under zero tolerance offense of drugs. Okay, so this goes to that situation where we might have a student that is obviously under the influence of something. It may not be alcohol. We're not sure what it is. We've had to call a emergency response to this situation, and that student's behavior is such that leads an administrator to believe that they're under the influence of something, and as such, we'd like to be able to address it as a Category 4 offense, which could lead to a 30 to 90-day remand to the alternative school. Okay. The explanation, possession of being under the influence of or having consumed alcohol or any other intoxicating substance not determined to be an illicit drug and not covered under the zero tolerance offense of drugs. So those are the two proposed changes that we make to alcohol. And again, with the zero tolerance offense, all I wanted to emphasize here is in 2324, the Code of Conduct has possession, use, or distribution of any drug substance unlawful for a person 21 years of age or younger to possess pursuant to local, state, or federal law other than alcohol or tobacco products. So this is going to cover CBD and some of the vapes and some of the ingredients that we're finding in vapes. We want to remove that, cover that under that Category 3, tobacco, vape, and CBD. And then add, instead, going back to selling or buying, trying to sell or buy marijuana, synthetic drugs, or any controlled substance as defined under Tennessee or federal state law, or the dispensation of any prescription drug or the possession of any prescription drugs not prohibited for the individual. So again, this would just go back to anything that's 0.03% if it's marijuana or any other illegal drug that the student may be in possession of. Okay? The other thing that we wanted to change within zero tolerance is a mandatory calendar year expulsion, and we just want to clarify from the time of the incident. We just want to make sure that that's a clarifying statement, proposed statement within the Code of Conduct. In 2425, possession of being under the influence of marijuana or any substance that it has a positive presumptive field test, which contains THC, any controlled substance, synthetic drug, or drug paraphernalia as defined under Tennessee or federal law. So that's the proposed change for 2425. Another offense that we're looking at is actually involving buses and major offenses. As you know, transportation reviews, and we've worked closely with transportation the last couple of years. One of the things that we have run into is fighting on the bus. A proposed disciplinary action for a major offense of fighting on the bus can be 10 to 15 days off of the school bus. There are times that administrators have wanted to suspend a student from school as well for that offense, but because there has not been something stipulated within the Code of Conduct that says that that is permissible, we wanted to make sure that that wording gets placed in there so that, one, fighting, I think we're all in agreement, fighting on a school bus is far more dangerous than fighting in the school. We shouldn't have fights anywhere, but we put other students' lives at risk. So the proposed change is under fighting on the school bus, transportation recommends between 5 and 15 days bus suspension in conjunction with building level discipline at the principal's discretion, referral to school counseling as needed. So this would allow a building principal to do if fighting in the school is a 3-day out of school suspension, they could get the 3-day out of school suspension and still be suspended off the bus for the 15 days or the 5 days, whatever is the recommendation at that point. Okay? So those are the revisions. Ladies and gentlemen, those were the proposals that were sent to us and that we'd like to make to the board.
Mr. Nelson?
Good evening, Mr. Slade. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for those revisions that you made to the student code of conduct, and I appreciate your diligence in your work there. I had a couple of questions for you. One, you were saying that if a student had a history of misbehavior, that information can be accessed throughout the building as they progress through grades. Does that follow them to the other schools, like from elementary to middle to high school?
The discipline record, they can go back and look at prior incidents from grade levels. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And then the threats, is that considered the bullying? Because most of the calls or concerns I get are around bullying. And I was just wondering, are there any increases to what happens to a student who's bullying? And if a student is being bullied, do they have to necessarily report it, or can it be a third-party reporting of an incident of bullying?
We encourage anybody that's aware of bullying to report. So whether that comes from a parent, a classified staff member, another student, we've seen it all in terms of reporting. So we would encourage anybody who has information around bullying of any student to report it. And we've, based on our policy, once that information is reported to us, we have a bullying tracking form that we use that initiates an investigation. In terms of your question about threats, threats can certainly be a part of bullying. Within our definition of bullying within the district, there's 5 elements that be present for it to be deemed an actual act of bullying, but that does not mean that the behavior is not addressed, because that behavior can be addressed. Let's say that it was just a threat and it wasn't somebody trying to exercise power over another student, which is another element. We can address that threat without it necessarily constituting the full definition of bullying. And so that's how we work those. But yes, sir, it can certainly be a part of bullying.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question, and this is not necessarily directed to you, and maybe Dr. Lonavetti may be able to chime in on this, but in consideration of all the potential drug issues that we have in school, our nursing staff, do they have Narcan, or are they able to use Narcan in cases of overdoses or anything of that nature?
Yes, so our nurses are trained and so are our building administrators.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I have.
Mr. Mayberry?
I want to echo what Mr. Nelson just said about bullying. I've heard just recently, I haven't actually talked to you about it or anything, but I have recently heard about a parent that reached out that their kid had been bullied over like grade levels, and it's the same kids. And so I'm curious about the enforcement of, on that for the kids that keep doing it. Does it add up? Does it get more strict as it goes up? I'm sorry, I don't remember that exact part of the code of conduct, but I'm curious about that.
Yes, and I will tell you that discipline is within the school year, right? So now we can look at a student's history and know that there's a pattern of history throughout throughout their school career, if you will. But that whatever happens within that school year is where we would look at progressive discipline for that student. So if it's reported and it's founded, and a student one consequence happens to them and they do it again, then that consequence becomes more severe and continues to become more severe and works its way through the categories. Okay. Now, the next school year, students get fresh starts. Okay. And so, you can imagine that a student had an offense as a 5th grader and they hit the 10th grade. We're not going back and you did this then. And, but throughout that year, progressive discipline does happen. And so if a student does that, just like it could be any offense, if a student has multiple fights, what happens the first time, I guarantee you won't be the consequence that happens the second time, because they'll continue to get consequence, will continue to increase with the same behavior occurring.
Okay. I remember, I believe last year, it's maybe a norm question, but I believe last year we added a new position for the buses for discipline. I was curious how that's going, and how's that going?
So we employed our transportation behavior specialist. He's been working closely with Mr. Slight, and Mr. Slight might have mentioned that in his presentation, that partnership has improved our retention significantly in the transportation department. It's improved the partnerships at the school level with the administrators. And I think some of the software that Mr. Holman's going to talk about today is also a result of that.
And I remember when we were talking about it before, one of my concerns was trying to get a lot of the paperwork and stuff off the principals, usually the APs, that were having to do it from bus discipline. So this person is now taking that over. Is that correct?
What this person has done has built the bridge between the transportation department and those administrators. And once again, I don't want to take away from Mr. Holman, because our technology department has also been crucial in tying those pieces together.
Great, thank you. And last thing, is there anything that we are looking at adding to if a student may has one of these drug offenses, the THC or whatever, where they can go through a program or something to kind of get back on the right path? So, for instance, we've had a couple of seniors this year that were caught with like low-level THC vaping, and they're automatically expelled. They can't graduate. They can't walk their class. And I would love to see some type of program that actually tries to help them through that, overcome that, whatever that would look like, to allow them maybe to reintegrate before the end of the school year to be able to walk, if that's a possibility.
Yes, sir. Before I answer that, I do want to say on the bus and working with Mr. Archibald is one of the reasons why we were able to come back together on the fighting on the bus. That was a collaboration between West Creek Middle School administration, Mr. Archibald, and myself. And so it's going very, very well.
That's great.
As far as what you're saying about something additional, we have spent time this year meeting with multiple groups to collaborate on what this could potentially look like for CMCSS. We have met with teacher focus groups. We have met with administrator focus groups. We have met with parent advisory around some ideas that we have. We're not ready at this point to be able to lay out the entire idea, but it is something that we have been working on all year long to see that the approach that we currently have isn't necessarily one that is working at this time for our students. And so we are reviewing those and taking a look at it. We've made a trip to some other surrounding areas to look at what's working in other districts. And so we hope to be able to come back maybe by the end of summer with something for you, something more with some details around what we'd like to propose.
So that would be for the upcoming school year, the proposal?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir. Great presentation. Next item on the agenda is 2023-2024 May budget amendments. Dr. Luna?
Yes, I'd like to welcome Chief Financial Officer Chris Renaud up to talk about the current budget amendments.
Brought my glasses this time. Good evening, Board. Dr. Vetter. This, as y'all know, this is the last budget amendment, so what you'll see is that we're just truing up a lot of the accounts so that we're favorable at the end of the year, so that we do not get an audit finding from the comptroller's office. So going over GP, the main thing you'll see is an increase in revenue of $13 million, primarily for TISA. They did some adjustments and we were awarded some outcome funding. And again, can't anticipate those, but I'm including those in this budget amendment. We also received some additional funds for JROTC. The Tennessee Titans came through again with a donation to increase and improve our girls flag football. We also, this is the first year, in case y'all were aware, that we're getting reimbursed. Teachers are licensed professionals, got an extended maternity and paternity leave. And so now we're starting to incorporate the reimbursement from the state in this budget, and then we do have some minor insurance recoveries. Overall, you'll see this is the last payroll reconciliations that we have. We have to budget, and looking at our accruals, we have some people, a significant amount of people that are eligible to be paid out their personal leave, so we're budgeting for that. Encouraging as many people as we can to use their personal leave, but they have the opportunity to cash that in case y'all weren't aware. We are forecasting some higher insurance costs. We are forecasting some increase in legal fees. And then we also needed to budget some additional revenue for Kirkwood Elementary to make sure You know, most of the funding comes through capital projects, but we are anticipating a little overage with furniture, so we're including that budget, and various miscellaneous other expenses to include but not limited to maintenance equipment and fee and supplies increase. We are writing off an additional $50,000. As y'all know, one of the positions that we take is that no child will go hungry, but in order we have to reimburse child nutrition because that is funded through USDA. So we are forecasting an increase of $50,000 for that. Increase in fuel and some increase in technology, as well as some additional furnitures for the schools to prepare them for next fiscal year. So looking at revenue, I do need my glasses. Here on local revenue, you'll see an increase on $10,000 that we've gotten through contributions and gifts. Under state revenue, here you see the increase in TISA by $12.2 million. And then we're forecasting $600,000 reimbursement from the state for the Paid Parental Leave Act. JROTC, $82,000. We're forecasting increase reimbursement from JROTC. And then we've collected approximately $460,000 in other grants and funds from the state. And then you can see under non-revenue sources, insurance, we've been paid approximately $64,000, bringing our total revenues to $13.4 million in this amendment. So going up, and that's again, $13.4 million is what we're seeing increase. That's primarily given that we only have approximately $1.3 million in expenses, most of that will be going to fund balance. Under regular instruction, again, just payroll projections and associated benefits. Here you see an increase in equipment for $518,000. That is being offset. We just moved money from the technology fund into, whenever we buy laptops for our teachers or our students, they need to go into this account, so we're just moving that money, so you'll see that offset later on. Under alternative schools, you just see payroll projections adjustments and associated benefits, and then a marginal increase in special education for payroll projections and associated benefits. Here you just see that we just move money around an innovative school model so that we can spend it out through this rest fiscal year. Just an offset primarily for salaries and associated benefits under vocational education. No change to student services, no change to health services. Other student support, you can see that they're just offsets. And again, we bought, y'all are aware that we bought Eclipse glasses for all of our students. And they all seem to really enjoy that. And then again, adding the additional funds and offsetting the expenses for the Tennessee Titans contribution for our girls flag football. And then here, regular instruction support, it's just primarily payroll projections and associated benefits. Again, just making sure those accounts are going to be positive at the end of the year. Under special education support, just marginal increase. We got some additional funding for SPED entitlement grants, so we're aligning that in E-Plan, and then we are forecasting marginal increase in travel cost. Under technology here, you'll see that $503,000 reduction. That's what we're using to offset where we transferred from technology to regular instruction. Under adult education support, no change. Under Board of Education, we are forecasting some increase in legal costs and then forecasting some liability and property costs. Through the tornado and the windstorms, we're starting to see higher increase in insurance costs and, of course, adding Kirkwood on. And then here you see the $50,000 that we're increasing our reserves to cover for our child nutrition. No change in Director of Schools. Printing and communication, no change. Office of the Principals, again, just forecasting higher salaries and the benefits associated with that. Under business affairs, we have several people that are retiring and leaving the district, so they're eligible for a vacation payout. There is some increase in there for overlap and overtime, and then the benefits associated with that. And then we are seeing an increase in office supplies for checks and receipts. Under human resource, you'll see the some of that's payroll projection adjustments, but the majority of that, again, is the personal leave buyback, and we just have to forecast out of all the people that have eligible that have not used their personal leave, we anticipate that they won't, so we're just budgeting in case they decide to cash that in. And then operation of the plant, we moved a lot of money around, but the main thing that you'll see is furniture and equipment for Kirkwood Elementary School, and then you'll see the increase in insurance premium for bringing on Kirkwood Elementary School. Maintenance of the plant, it's primarily maintenance gasoline costs that we're forecasting to be higher. Under early childhood education, we're just forecasting an increase in travel costs. No change to debt services, no change to interfund transfer. Overall, total expenditures at $1.3 million. Again, with the additional funding that we've gotten from TISA, we're just going to contribute the majority of that to our fund balance. So here you see fund balance increasing by $12.1 million. Under federal, again, I have to make y'all aware of any changes to federal. We did receive some additional funding for IDA pre-K, IDA B, AALN, and as well as APIN awarded us another $1 million additional funding. So this is $500,000 for this school year, and then we'll add an additional $500,000 for the following, because the middle of the summer splits the school year. Does that make sense? And then we just reallocated some fundings with the other grants that you see listed above. Under child nutrition, we had a marginal increase of revenue of $33,000. Primarily, most of that is through contracted services, where we provide services to other schools at $28,000. We are forecasting some increases in expenses, $16,000 for equipment in servicing our child nutrition, and then $151,000 just to cover potential food spoilages and damages. Overall fund balance is still healthy, meeting minimum state requirements. Transportation, the biggest thing is that we're just forecasting an increase in revenue from property tax, so we're just recognizing that inside of our balance sheet. So you'll see the revenue increase of $600,000. And then with that, as you get more money, you still got to pay the trustees commission. So you see the expense on the trustee at $12,000, but overall an increase to fund balance of $620,000. And again, still meets the state minimum requirement for fund balance. Extended school, this one's real easy. We had funding in one particular account 189, which is other personnel, and then the state changed the guidelines on where they wanted it to be reported. They wanted it to be into a teacher account or accounts associated with those. So there's no change to it. All we did was just move the money from one account to another. But you'll see there's no changes. And I'm done. Any questions? I wanted to go as long as Matt, for the record.
Mr. Nelson?
Thank you. So, Mr. Renaud, one question. I know that you had the increase in child nutrition in the budget there. Is that enough to carry in throughout the summer, and we'll be able to feed the children when there's no school?
Well, we will be providing food, but just remember, it only has to cover us through June 30th, sir, because then that becomes another budgeted year. And we've greatly prepared for the July and the rest of the school, sir.
Thank you, sir. St. B. Burt, Dr. Luna.
Board members, as we approach the last day of the school year, we are already deep in planning for the 24-25 school year. We appreciate the board's support with elementary rezoning to allow us to reimagine the Burt Elementary and St. B Elementary zones to allow CMCSS to expand our choices for families. Last fall, when we presented the plan to the community and school board, we shared the vision for St. Bethlehem Early Learning Center and Burt Innovation Center. We were happy to see the excitement for these changes that will begin next school year. We have had great meetings with the Burt High School Alumni Association and early learning stakeholders about the changes. One thing we have reiterated from the start is that we want to continue to preserve the history and honor the traditions of both schools, including their names and mascots. Since they will no longer be officially elementary schools, we do need to submit state paperwork that is due next month to update the official names and other directory information. To complete this process, we are asking the board to formally approve the updated names that were part of the rezoning plan: St. Bethlehem Early Learning Center and Burt Innovation Center.
Thank you. Have any questions? Thank you, Dr. Luna. Number 8, Goal 9, implement critical upgrade to technology resource and district building to enhance district security, transparency, and effectiveness. Policy reference E1, E2. Dr. Luna.
That's a long goal. So Leighton Brown from our technology department is here to give us the latest updates with technology.
Well, good evening. I'll take just a few moments to share how some of the ways the technology department has worked to increase district security, transparency, and effectiveness over the past year. On the security front, right now we're in the middle of an initiative started by safety where we're adding external security cameras to every single portable classroom building in the district. We came up with a standard that would cover most of the time, depending upon the style of the portable, both doors. It covers the entrance, and actually the schools will get a little bit of extra coverage out of it as well. This is something schools and school resource officers have been asking for, and we're happy to do it. We have about 5 elementary schools to go, and then we'll move on to the middle and high schools, and we hope to have that complete before school starts in the fall. We're also beginning work on the development of a threat assessment portable. Currently, safety administrations, SROs keep this information in shared spreadsheets and emails. So the idea is to create a central location to log the details of any threats and any resulting actions from that threats, whether they're credible or non-credible. It's a clearinghouse of information. It's not a notification system. It's more an information storage system so that all the stakeholders can see what's going on and be able to look at the history. And we have a planned completion of that to start for the next school year. We also added a virtual private network, or VPN, to all staff laptops. This was pretty exciting because it basically provides a benefit to the district's network security umbrella of internet filters. So when staff are off-site, they'll still have access to our filters, our firewalls, and other online resources, the same as if they were in a school or any other administrative building. And they'll even have access to resources that are normally not available outside of the CMCSS network. But this gives them that added safety and security of that, and also access to those features. And finally, on the security front, we're partnering with an external vendor to conduct some network penetration testing to evaluate and test the security of our network services and make sure they can't be gotten into from the outside. On the transparency front, it seems like just a year ago, because it was, that I was standing in this very spot and telling you that based on back-ordered equipment and some delays from some of the vendors, we were finally going to be able to start upgrading the equipment in the boardroom, and I'm happy to say we have upgraded the equipment in the boardroom. We added several cameras, one of which is pointed directly at me right now. We updated all of the microphones, added electronic voting, and we had a few growing pains in the beginning, but we've worked past all of that. It's gotten a lot smoother, and it's going well. I think y'all would agree, and it's done very well. And the most important part of this, especially increasing transparency, is in conjunction with the communication department, who then takes the video and captions it and posts it to YouTube. After the breaking in period, we started posting those videos in November of last year. Of the 11 videos currently out there, they have an average of 130 views each. If you ignore the recent public hearing for the budget, those goes up to an average of 140 views per video. So the public is actually engaging with these and checking them out. It's a valuable resource for the public to get an insight into what's going on in our board's meetings. On effectiveness, well, Mr. Slide already mentioned the Admin Plus portal. Mr. Brumley mentioned it as well. It's basically a discipline referral system. It allows teachers and bus drivers to refer behaviors for discipline to administrators. Now, one of the good things about this is, Mr. Slide also mentioned some coding issues we've had in the past. It allows administrators to look at the description of the behaviors that the students are doing, and then pick from a pre-populated list that comes from behaviors that match local discipline-worthy behaviors and also state-worthy behaviors. And it also cuts down on some of the mistakes that can be made in this, because once a behavior or its multiple behaviors are selected, the consequences for those behaviors are limited only to consequences based on those behaviors. So, for example, if an administrator wants to recommend a student be suspended, it can't be done if the behavior hasn't been picked from one of the state reportable coded behaviors, because that has to be reported to the state. So it helps cut down on some of the errors that way by allowing the cause and effect to work together. We also instituted the collection of electronic federal impact aid forms. I checked with Anthony this morning. This has had a tremendous impact, because in January of 2023, our response rate to the federal impact aid forms was about 58.9%. In January of this calendar year, the response rate went up to 78.2%. So obviously making it easier for our families to fill out this vital information gathering instrument made the response rate go up, which gives us better information and helps impact our funding in a better way. We also have transitioned what was a senior programmer position to a new data integrity analyst position. It's not a new body in the district, but we actually looked at what the position was doing and everything they're doing and made the job description match the actual work. So basically, this individual will be starting later this month, and they'll be tasked with ensuring accuracy and standardizing the format of district data, specifically where it applies to local, state, and federal reporting. It's just a good way of making sure that all the data is uniform across the board. They'll also be assisting with documenting and training on how to do standard data entry into PowerSchool and also Munis, and eventually they'll get into analyzing data across multiple systems just to make sure we're uniform, to make sure we're complying with state and federal reporting requirements, and also cut down on the errors that can sometimes come into that. So, any questions?
On that data with the federal program, can parents that are coming in to Fort Campbell from overseas, can they address that to let us know that they are coming this way with so many kids? Have we thought about that?
That would come in based on if they had already started to enroll through the enrollment center. If we don't know about them, once the enrollment center starts a process on them, they start receiving any forms that are electronic will start coming across, and they'll have access to them if they can access them from where they are.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nelson?
Sir, so right now, is there a mechanism in place that will compel a parent to go to PowerSchool to look at their children's grades? Because one of the saddest things is when you get to the end of the school year and a parent comes to you and says, "Why, my child is failing, can we do something?" Is there anything that can compel maybe an email, quarterly, monthly email that says, "Hey, you need to look at your child's grades and, take action"?
Well, the best way to handle that is a bullet point I just realized I skipped over, which was helping communications implement Parent Square. You heard a presentation from them earlier in the year about how much that has driven public engagement. And always the best thing is when teachers are communicating with parents to say this resource is available. That's the best way to get them in there. There's really no better way to compel them than the person who's dealing with their child on a daily basis to say, please come check out how your child is doing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayberry?
Did you want to speak that, Anthony?
There we go. I just wanted to share, that's a really good point. A couple of things. So we have started with progress reports, which are quarterly. We send a communication out to families with directions on signing up for PowerSchool if they have not before and linking them to that. Something else that our senior program, Eric Sallier, has been doing is he actually gets a report of parents who have not interacted with PowerSchool at a certain point in the school year, and then he actually initiates an email to those parents reminding them that PowerSchool's there, how to access, how to sign up. And so we've been doing that, I think, the last 2 years, and that has helped. We still don't have 100% participation. We'd love to see that, but we are making some gains, and I know that as I hear anecdotally from teachers and principals, more parents are using that tool. And I have a presentation for you all on Parent Square next month, and excited to share a lot of the success with that.
Okay, I look forward to that. Thank you.
I just want to give you some feedback. I just really appreciate the work that's been done here for the security of the classrooms, which is incredible. The VPN, I would actually like to have one because I have trouble getting onto that on my laptop, but I use VPN for work, so I know exactly what that is. That's great. We appreciate the upgraded devices here in our boardroom. And I just want to give you feedback about PowerSchool. As a parent that uses PowerSchool, it has been really great to be able to receive information and communicate with our teachers. So that has been a very effective tool as a parent myself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. County Commissioners, you have any comments? No. School board members? See none. Thank you. Dr. Luna?
Good evening, board members. As I know all of you are aware, legislation was recently passed in the state of Tennessee that permits flexibility for school districts to allow for the arming of teachers. While this legislation may be needed in some districts in Tennessee, CMCSS has been fortunate to maintain a strong partnership with the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office and other law enforcement agencies. We currently have armed SROs in all of our schools, with more than one SRO in our larger schools. In addition to the approximately 60 armed SROs protecting our campuses, our community has hundreds of law enforcement officers and deputies patrolling throughout the county. We are in a much better position than many smaller and more rural districts across Tennessee. Since the legislation has been introduced, I have had numerous conversations with the individual school board members, parents, teachers, law enforcement personnel, and other community members. There seems to be a strong consensus that teachers should be allowed to teach and trained law enforcement personnel should be allowed to focus on school security in counties where it is already readily available. Yesterday, school district leadership met with Sheriff Fuson and other law enforcement officials during our quarterly security stakeholder meeting, and one of our agenda items was arming teachers. As mentioned, the new law establishes the sheriff and director of schools as the authorities to oversee any potential implementation within each district. Because of the strong partnership between CMCSS and the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, with the presence of highly trained and armed SROs in every school, Sheriff Fuson and I are in agreement that CMCSS will not pursue implementing the new law for our schools. We will continue to focus our efforts on expanding the SRO program, refining existing school safety and security protocols, and implementing innovative strategies to keep our schools safe. Meanwhile, we will continue to support our teachers in doing what they do best, educating our children. Mr. Garland, this concludes my report for the evening.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.